Good evening, everyone. I call to order the June 5th, 2023 business meeting of everyone and request everyone in the audience to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Ms. Wagner, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Jones?
Here.
Dr. Moffitt? Mr. Morosky?
Bathroom.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Here.
President Lindy?
Here. Members of the public who wish to speak may do so by clicking the chat button now. The chat feature will be open for your requests for 5 minutes. Please submit your name, your affiliation, your school community, your topic, and your contact information if you would like a direct response to any question you might have. I'd also like to wish everyone a happy Pride Month. CPS has lots going on, and I would refer folks to the website and social media to see one way in which our district is reinforcing its commitment to equity. As we move to our second item on the agenda tonight, these are our board priorities. I'll be very swift and say these came from our board work session in late January, and we decided at the end of somewhere in May to extend them until the end of June, given the magnitude of these 5 and where we were in progress on each of them. And I would just say, you know, this effort to make sure we have clear priorities as a board and that we're spending our time in alignment with those priorities matters, because I think this is about leadership, and I mean that in 3 specific ways. The first is that we're doing things intentionally and on purpose versus reacting. The second is that we have a shared set of issues, that what we're talking about and spending most of our time in is where there is overlap in the interests of our board members and that make the biggest difference for children. And then finally, that we spend our time in meetings well by putting these most important topics at the center. I think you'll see this reflected in tonight's agenda, and I'm looking forward to doing a reset on what our next board level priority should be over the summer. My hope is that they can shift towards monitoring our progress towards the district's 3-year goals and guardrails. And I'll turn now to the next item, which is any updates we have tonight from our superintendent.
Thank you. I think we actually have our updates tonight in presentations.
That sounds great.
Okay.
So we will return to this section in the form of the 3 important presentations we have this evening. As we move to the next item on our agenda, we have some minutes to approve. Is there a motion to approve the special meeting minutes for May 8th in the business, excuse me, I just blew right past hearing of the public. We are now at the item on the agenda for hearing of the public. Before I read some of the details, Phyllis, do we have any in-person speakers tonight? Rob, do we have any online speakers tonight? Okay, last call. Anybody in the room like to be here for hearing of the public? Okay, now we'll move to minutes. Is there a motion to approve special meeting minutes for May 8th and business meeting minutes for May 8th?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. We have 4 committee reports this evening. We'll start with the Ad Hoc Attendance Boundaries Committee. Dr. Moffitt, would you, we go either way. Do you want to present both of them together, or do you want to do them in 2 pieces?
I'm experiencing some technical difficulties. Can I go last and I can do them both together?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chair Morosky for Policy and Equity Committee from May 19th.
And unfortunately, I was unable to be there, so my colleague, Ms. Bolton, will present the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Chair. This will be very quick. For policy, coming out of a board effort and also finance committee and a request at the treasurer, the policy committee began to discuss the possibility of having a competitive bidding practices policy, and we are working on that. Besides that, we also learned a little bit more about cooperative purchasing, in part from our general counsel and also our superintendent's efforts to kind of bring us up to date on what that could mean for us in our purchasing efforts. Also, there was an LSDMC town hall, and it came up there that we probably need to revise or revisit the LSDMC policy as it pertains to some very specific kinds of issues within that policy. And I think those will be appearing in the next policy meeting. But the biggest effort that was, again, continuing and starting to round the turn, or as Joe Nuxall would say, rounding third and heading home, the revision of the bylaws. And we got through a significant amount of that. Those proposals, what remains from those proposals then is, so the general counsel took those back and will embed them. And we have maintained a status as to which the committee agreed to or would be recommending. But the last two things we have to do are recommendations from myself and particularly board staff, as well as a reshuffling and reorganizing of the bylaws. And that we can do in the next meeting and probably can then bring back to the full board those issues for the full board discussion and a vote regarding the change in bylaws. I submit and hope for approval.
Thank you, Deputized Chair of Policy Committee, Member Bolton. Any questions for the Policy and Equity Committee? Mr. Morosky.
I just want to say thanks so much for Ms. Bolton and Ms. Weinberg for carrying on in my absence. It was an unexpected absence, and I really appreciate it. Didn't skip a beat, so thank you.
We missed you.
Any other questions for the Policy and Equity Committee? Okay, we'll move next to Budget, Finance, and Growth from Chair Member Bolton.
Yes, a delayed but a very full report from the Preschool Promise folks regarding their budget. Also further discussion as to their growth, our growth, and talking about the need to continue to grow preschool seats and the interest within the community. One of the things in their budget, though, had to pertain to, several of the things pertain to items that are still in negotiations between the district and Preschool Promise regarding the new agreement, which we would all hope to be new and signed soon. My understanding, the administration sent another red line back to the Preschool Promise folks, and I guess we await theirs. We also then talked at some length regarding the use of ESSER funds and what that would mean. There was a list also presented as a result of the LSDMC town hall that was held by Dr. Moffitt and also our treasurer. There was further discussion as well for the 5-year forecast, which, as we've heard as a full board, have heard that, but those were the most significant aspects from the report. We had the monthly financial overview, which is always great to look at and see and appreciate. And not surprisingly, there was also some discussion regarding the transportation, but knowing that we would be receiving a transportation update tonight, we forego that whenever we can in finance. So I believe there was, one other thing, not surprising and of great import to the community, was that we at least began some sort of a discussion regarding student fees, which also came before the Community Audit Committee. I submit and hope for approval.
Thank you, Member Bolton. Any questions for the Finance Committee? Okay, Dr. Moffitt, are you in an okay spot to hit the two reports?
I'm doing much better thanks to our team. I'm going to start with the minutes from the May 22nd meeting for ad hoc and welcome my committee members to also join in if there appears to be something that I omit. We did discuss back in May the possibility of our tenure as a committee sunsetting. And then we did some miraculous things that I'll talk about at our next meeting, but we are preparing a very nice report for the board to summarize what we've been discussing for the past few months, and then also to make a recommendation. We had a lot of visitors and discussion around Pleasant Ridge Montessori, Silverton Elementary, and the discussion of a magnet school that seems to have been really a big topic for the community. I think in our May 22nd meeting, there was standing room only. We had a lot of concerns about that, and a lot of visitors discussed the taking away of Silverton's magnet status and what that would potentially do for them. And Board Member Bolton was able to provide a historical perspective in tandem with Board Member Jones about how CANS went through very similar reorganization, I suppose is what I'm going to call it, and their enrollment is actually bursting at the seams. And so we talked about potential, explaining to them what that would do for them, and then also about breaking our district down into the corridor model and what that would look like if we were to have a middle school in the corridor model would be east, west, central, and then what it would look like if we were to have a middle school in the east, central, or west. The only corridor that could really accommodate that, I believe, was the central. And we had some discussion about that at the May 22nd meeting. And so that is summarized in the minutes, and I submit those for approval. Moving on to June 5th, I'm sorry, to the May 25th meeting. That meeting was May 10th, I'm sorry. This is the May 25th meeting. We talked about school safety zones and having our schools have a 1 mile perimeter considered a safety zone around that school so that we could address safety concerns, walking, school bus, crosswalks, crossing guards. We discussed that. We went back to the discussion around middle school and had a very lengthy literature review presented by the admin team around the justification for 5th, 6th, 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade middle schools. And that's actually on the board docs for you all to take a look at. And we went back to Silverton being a digital leadership school. The community also spoke out again about wanting magnet status for possibly Leader in Me or a digital leadership school and what that would look like. We asked the administration to do a little bit more engagement with that particular LSDMC, the neighborhood community council, and have some more engagement around that area. We talked about, with regard to middle schools, what does that look like for transportation? And again, looking at where that could go, the report is up there along with some wonderful maps by Jeremy. We also shared about the new building purchase of Bramble Elementary, and the community of John P. Parker came out, shared some concerns about what has been advertised on our website as a micro school and what that looks like. There's also significant interest in the community wanting to sit on the LSDMC. It was shared by administration that the proposal for the new Bramble building would be a preschool first. It would not impact John P. Parker, and that it would each additional year add a grade up to the 2nd grade. So this is a proposal. The micro school discussion was squashed as far as this is just a discussion. Nothing has been determined by the board. The programming, the proposed is the micro school option, but we have not decided that. And that we would also be discussing the boundaries in that committee and making a recommendation after administration has done some preliminary work, presented it to us in possibly June or July, then we would have some boundaries to present officially before the school year began. And we would encourage the administration form the LSDMC and then also engage some of the community that did show up from the Madisonville community, from the Silverton community, regarding the desire to sit on the LSDMC for the new Bramble building. And then also one consideration is the community shared that there have been some safety concerns around the particular property, and that they would want to engage with helping us navigate that. And the new Bramble School, which we don't have a name for, would be a feeder to John P. Parker, potentially not impacting the current enrollment at John P. Parker for their preschool. That was a significant concern that came up as well. And then John P. Parker would be a feeder. But all of this is just things that we're discussing. Nothing has been determined, but we will be finalizing a nice lengthy report we're working on to the board regarding our recommendations and also to continue. I'm going to invite Board Member Jones and Board Member Bolton to share anything that I may have missed regarding the ad hoc.
I don't have anything.
Okay. And we do have a recommendation to continue, particularly because we were anticipated to sunset in May, but with the purchase of the new building and the work that needs to be done, we are in our report going to formalize a recommendation to continue. And I do submit both of these reports for the May 10th meeting and the May 25th meeting for approval.
Thank you, Chair Moffitt. Any questions or discussion on the committee reports? I have just a couple. You said, I wanted to make sure I was following. I was going to ask coming into tonight about a final report and recommendations. It sounds like you brought that up, so thank you. So is there a date when you want to present that to the board?
There may be a date. We're looking at trying to finalize it in June. With vacations of our admin side, we want to work on the boundary piece for the Bramble building. We're trying to find a date because vacations are among us and we understand we need our team to be well rested. So take some time. We're trying to finalize a time in June, but more realistically, we will do the work in July. We're compiling it now. And then by the August meeting, maybe the first meeting in August, have our presentation ready.
This is helpful. I'm glad. Thank you for clarifying. I think in the work plan that we approved last, the sunset date was end of June. I didn't see a recommendation in the committee report to extend it. Did you want to amend it so that it has a recommendation to extend?
Sure. So I will then like to amend this report and let's see, hold on, because I want to say, I thought we talked about that in here, but if we didn't, then I do want to make a recommendation that we extend our committee sunset date. I don't have a date at this moment, but we're finalizing it. Do I need a date?
No, I think we've got lots of choices, right? So one option is to extend it indefinitely. I think that's no longer an ad hoc committee. It could be to extend it to a date certain. But I do think it's important because I think unless we have, I think that the committee will sunset at the end of June based on what we approved last. And we only have one more meeting in June. So I wanted to make sure we got in front of this before we were, up in the last meeting.
Sure.
Ms. Bolden?
Yes, Mr. President and Madam Chair. I think what we discussed in part was extending it at least through the calendar year for membership reasons as well as impact. So that would be, and then at the end of that is, to the President's point, it could become more of a permanent situation, or the assignment or whatever could be amended or expanded or changed based upon it. But extending it, I think, through December 31st would keep our membership together through that process.
And Ms. Jones, did you want to share something too?
Well, I was going to repeat the December date since we had referenced that. I do think it's important, though. I think the report will tell us a lot and guide us, and it may change depending on the board's feedback. I think it could potentially be earlier or later or whatever, but I think once the report gets done, and I agree with Dr. Moffitt that the realistic date of presenting that, you said August, right? Mm-hmm. Which makes perfect sense because there's a lot of stuff in here. And we want to make sure that the report is comprehensive and that the board has an opportunity to really look at all aspects of it. So what I'm saying is December was the date we decided, but I think once the board has a chance, the full board has a chance to look at it, it may have some suggestions about sunsetting or continuing the work as is.
And that's very helpful, Board Member Jones. I want to ask the superintendent too, is there any, and there needn't to be, was there anything you wanted to share around timeline and final reports?
We support.
So then what I'm hearing is we'll approve the report. People can vote however they like, but I would approve the report tonight, looking forward to a presentation in August with the idea that we could use that report as an opportunity to figure out the sunset date for the committee, possible end of calendar year, given the committee's makeup. Is that in line with what you were proposing, Dr. Moffat?
Yeah, I do think we need to add that to the May 25th minutes. Ms. Phyllis, if we could just do that, just add that we're going to temporarily propose to continue, but the report will be in August. What you just shared is good. I think we need to just form.
Yeah, so we would say like maybe somewhere in the 25th report. I'm looking at page 5. This would be before the lit review starts. There could be an action item. The committee is requesting that the board make time in its August meetings for a final, for a report on the committee's work, and then room for a discussion about a sunset date for the committee.
That sounds good.
Phyllis, did that get you what you needed? All right. So the report is on the floor as amended. Any other discussions on the ad hoc committee reports, plural? Okay. Is there a motion to adopt all 4 of our committee reports this evening?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Jones. We've had lots of discussion. Anything else that I missed? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Committee reports are approved as amended. We're now on item G. We have 3 very important discussions this evening. We're going to get into the first one in just a second, which is the strategic planning process, updates from our superintendent, and then questions from board members. I would just want to mention again that this is an example of us dedicating meeting time to a priority that we set in advance. And I appreciate everyone's commitment to this part of leadership, doing things on purpose rather than reacting, prioritizing shared issues that make the biggest difference for children, and then spending time in our meetings aligned to those most important topics. And we'll turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you, President Lindy. So this is just an overview of where we are right now with the administrative portion of the strategies for our goals and guardrails. And so we'll go to the next slide. So strategies and actions define the path to the goals and guardrails as aligned to vision, mission, and forecast. And I think by now we understand, and as we shared previously, that the board has engaged already in the updating and reviewing the vision, mission, and forecast. Already, the board has also approved goals and guardrails as we've been going through throughout this year. We have transitioned to student outcome focused governance, and a part of that was identifying and codifying those student outcome goals that we would focus on, as well as the guardrails or the values that were identified through a series of conversations by the board with the community. So we have our goals and guardrails that have been approved by the board. The second piece to that, or the third piece to that, is really the strategies and actions. And those are the pieces that go along with the goals and guardrails to look at how we bring those things to life. Strong roots support new growth. So of course, there's a rich history of investing in and prioritizing initiatives that have positively impacted students, families, community members, and employees. And that was really at the basis of the work that we have done at this point as a team around the strategies to support implementation of and getting to the goals that we set for our district. The strategies and actions outlined would not be possible without the past work that serves as the bridge to our future. So it's important to recognize that this is not completely starting over, but this is taking a review of where we are as a district, looking at where we're going next with our goals and the guardrails, the values that have been lifted to us from our community as we begin to move the district forward in terms of those strategies. As we strive to continuously improve, we celebrate the key bodies of work that the strategies and actions build upon, and it includes a variety of things that have already occurred in the district. For example, the work around the 3 E's to enroll, employer, enlist, the fact that we have various programs within our district or school systems of programs. We have a strong Montessori population where we are the first public school district. We have the first public high schools that were accredited in Montessori, and we're getting ready to go through the same kind of accreditation for our elementary schools. We have a longstanding partnerships and structures in terms of engagement. So from our ILTs, instructional leadership teams, to our LSDMCs, as well as community learning centers and school-based health centers as well. Continuing to build strong partnerships with our community as well as our college partners. There's pride, of course, in our school district from our alumni and the alumni groups, access to professional learning opportunities which are focused and relevant in classroom practices, and the list goes on. So this is not an exhaustive list, but just representative of some of the key elements and key points that we've identified as the basis and the foundation to really begin to look at the workaround strategies. So at this point, we plan design through a collaborative and an ongoing process. And I do want to reiterate that the board is currently engaged in the work around re-identifying, reviewing, reestablishing our mission, vision, and forecast. And that is a part of board work. And the board is doing that with engagement from the community. So while there has been quite a bit of engagement in this area as well, the board is coming back around again to do that engagement also, so that as we look at a full plan for our district, we're doing that understanding that this is where we're focused and this is where we look to see us positioned in the next 5, 7, 10 years and moving forward. The strategies portion of the strategic plan really focuses again on the goals and the guardrails. So this has started with a lot of work. So we talked about the foundational work that started first. The draft that we have that's posted online, it is up to its 10 plus, I think it's about 12, the 12th iteration, because of the 15-week cycle for design, and the strategic actions were updated based on the feedback. So not only were there working groups and working group individuals that were involved in the process, from the very beginning, the strategies have been placed on our district website. Surveys have been there as well for individuals to respond to. And from that, we've been able to collect that information, go back to the work group, and then make certain that the information is responsive in the goals and guardrails portion of the strategic plan. So far, engagement hours invested have been over 30 hours have been invested in the work from both internal and external stakeholders who have met in the evenings, during lunch. They've met virtually, they've met in person to really make certain that we are capturing what we believe is the most efficient and effective with beginning to look at how we are achieving the goals and the guardrails, specifically the goals that have been established and voted on by our board. And 600 plus individuals have been engaged in the overall process. So 63 work teams, 110 school leaders, 35 plus community partners, 114 feedback participants, and 288 survey responses were instrumental in the development of the strategies and actions as we look at where we're looking to go next. So this begins the opportunity and the next level of opportunity for getting feedback from the board around where we are right now. And as we get to this near final piece that will serve as, if we think about it as a sandwich, you know, the mission, vision, and forecast becomes the first bun. And it becomes the bun, and then the hamburger in the middle becomes the strategies to achieve the goals and guardrails. And then the final bun becomes how we then look at an implementation plan for each of the strategies. So this becomes the second piece to the overall sandwich that we will be looking at. The strategies outline how we will achieve the goals and guardrails. And the board has provided for us what the goals and guardrails are, but how will we do that? We see that in 5 different areas to really make certain that we're able to focus specifically in those spaces and identify what work looks like in those spaces. So those 5 areas are support our students, equip our educators, connect our community, ignite innovation, and optimize operations. And in the goals, as we think about what the goals have been, the goals are really codified around third grade reading, reading equity across the board, Algebra 1, College Credit Plus, and workforce credentials and graduation. And then our guardrails actually support those as well. The actions and associated implementation plans outline what we will do within each of the strategies to achieve the goals and guardrails. So if we're looking at support our students, how are we looking at evidence-based frameworks? And that means as we're thinking about what pedagogy looks like, how are we making certain that the protocols that we're using in classrooms with students, with teachers, are evidence-based and they have the expectation that there is going to be improvement by using those particular protocols. What are equitable experiences for our students? We want to make certain that we have safe and inclusive learning environments and identifying what that looks like. And of course, restorative practices. So that gives an idea of what those actions are as we think about support our students. And then we go to equip our educators. We want to make certain that our educators have the content that they need, the type of curriculum that they need for that content, that we're inclusive of cultural competence, that the necessary foundational skills are also there, and that overall we're looking at the whole child because we're thinking about overall well-being. The next is connect to our community. So thinking about our community and school alignment, our family engagement, how we're continuing to do work and continue to modify, grow, and move forward with the work around our LSDMCs and then our post-secondary partnerships as well. So in our connecting at the school base, our community base, and thinking about post-secondary. And igniting innovation. And so we think about innovation as what are those key levers that we are looking at around the goals and guardrails to ensure that we're continuing to look at how we are improving experiences for all of our students. So equitable enrollment, high school transformation, newcomer services for our ELL students, program equity across the board, and reimagining and re-exploring what our work looks like across the district. And last but not least, that really is the basis of the work that's really important to make sure that we're moving the district forward as well as we're beginning to look at the goals and guardrails is optimizing operations, human resources and talent, transportation, sustainable systems, and overall resource equity. So our next steps from this point, and we know that our timeline will be updated a bit because we are going through the engagement process around the mission, vision, and forecast. So this may get a bit off in that June area, but the initial hope was that for June, we would present our where we were with our strategies and for our goals and guardrails, and then give an opportunity to move to get a final strategic plan approved once we get our mission and vision and forecast, so that that's done all at one time as one completed body of work. And then spend the rest of the summer through the fall with refinement, working with cross-functional strategic teams to develop implementation plans for each of the actions. So the actions gives us the overarching information, but the implementation is really the how we get there for each of the individual areas. Continuing with awareness. So after we're getting through, this is the strategic plan, making certain that we are doing awareness opportunities so that now we have an approved strategic plan. We want to make certain that our school communities, our greater community is engaged in what that plan is, and we have collective efficacy around all of our stakeholders. And then from there, we move into implementation, execution, monitoring, and improvement based on leading indicators of success and necessary board updates. So I will stop here and take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Superintendent. Questions for the Superintendent on our strategic planning process? Ms. Bolton.
Hey, thanks. A couple things, several things, not surprisingly. I appreciate you headlining this as the strategies and actions to achieving the goals and guardrails. That makes it a little less confusing to the community than saying this is the strategic plan. I mean, this is part of the strategic plan, and we are completely aligned on the goals and the guardrails, and I think that's great. And breaking this into these three areas of vision, mission, forecast, guardrails, and then strategies and actions. And strategies and action really mostly falls y'all. and the front load of this is so much more the kind of board and community work. I appreciate this additional page, and I don't recall before, which is the strong roots and new growth. I think that will please staff. Appreciate how many folks have been involved in what you've been doing. And I know there's a bigger volume of this, and I've reacted to some of the more specific stuff in the larger volume of this, and I've shared that in writing with you. I will, for even this shortened version, again reiterate my concern philosophically about the order of the strategies outline how we achieve the goals and guardrails. I think for a public school system, especially CPS, obviously the priority is support for our students, and I understand why that kind of came first. But if this is an action plan for me, and I believe for this district, it starts with connecting to the community. And I'd rather start there and then get to, just from a logical standpoint, and I know I'm being picky about this, it isn't really meant to be order, but it appears to be order when we publish this, that you start with the community and then you start talking in terms of optimizing operations or igniting innovation, because so much of our innovation in this district has come from the community, and then equipping our educators and then supporting our students. I know our priority is supporting our students, but actually that's not where this starts. It's our priority, but it doesn't start the action plan. For me, and that's just me. But again, I would just reorder these, and I think what follows all of it and what you have within each category is really good on the next page. But for me, for our supportive community, and because it's a public institution, I think it all starts with connecting with the community, and then we follow how the system responds to that collection. And then I've already told you about that one section of the larger version that says we are all educators, and then I heard that again repeated at the retirement presentation. I think we can probably revisit that as well, but thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Bolton. So it's very interesting, and I know we had the conversation about we are all educators, but going through the 15+ week process and the hundreds of individuals that responded, there were two things that resonated with the group, and I think ultimately we'll come back, and whatever is the will of the board in terms for us to look at that, we'll do that. But there were two things that resonated with the group. One was the understanding of we are all educators was born out of the working group, because the belief and the belief across the board for those that were educators, i.e. in classrooms or whether they're supporting students, was that we were all buying into what was happening with students. And so that was a strong piece that came up. Actually, Rob, if you will put up the actual link from the webpage. So that was one of the reasons. So I think having additional discussion around that, but the feedback here that's where that came from. The ordering of the strategies, there was a lot of conversation around that as well. And so the conversation was that it's really not designed to be a hierarchy, so to speak, that they're all interconnected and all important. But the general consensus from those that were participating and those that gave feedback throughout the process was that regardless to what we do, all of us are doing that with students at the center. And so starting with the conversation around students and then everything filtering up to engage with, to really make sure that we're looking at the students. So I did capture the order that you gave in terms of the left to right, but that was the feedback that was provided by the group. So that's where it came from.
Respond to the superintendent. Yeah, I perfectly understand that. That's great. And then we kind of we have a circle. The students are in the middle of that circle, but this is all, way too into the weeds, but this is going to be an important document for several years. So of course, I want it to be as explicit as possible. The other part is we all buy into that. Every one of us in our school communities, in the district community, we all participate in the development of our kids. I just think there's a better way to say it than we are all educators. Frankly, it's the diversity of our backgrounds and perspectives that really help that whole child develop. And everybody has particular roles in that. But just to philosophically think about it, plus then I looked up, there's actually a vendor that is, we are all educators. So I was like, oh Lord, I don't want to be a part of, so at any rate, I appreciate the smaller version, and I think everybody would be well served to look at the larger version. Other larger issues have been addressed. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Member Bolden. Other board members' comments or questions on the strategic planning process? I have just one, but I want to see if anybody else, last call, nothing? Superintendent, did you want to share something here in response to Member Bolden?
Rob, if you will go to draft, just to right up above, I'm sorry, where the link is for draft, just up to the next, I'm sorry, at the end, yeah, right there. That's so this is the document that was shared. That's the more comprehensive document. If you'll scroll down a little, please. And so this is the document that's gone through several different iterations at this point. This is currently housed on our website, and each of the iterations was housed there as well. And then it does, you can continue, Rob. It does go into each of the strategies. You can keep going. Each of the strategies and look at the strategies and how those strategies play a role. This is the, if you'll go back down for me. One more time. I'm getting to the page. This is the page that Board Member Bolton is referencing right here. So in the document, it says we are all educators, and that's where that information was born from for this particular part of it. And then if you'll scroll down to the rest of and then we get into the individual strategies, and you can keep going. And then the actions, identifying what those actions are, and how they would then look in terms of preparing for implementation. So this is available on our website for everyone, and it's been there since we started the process.
Thank you, Superintendent. So if there are no other questions from other board members, the question I wanted to ask, or first of all, thank you for sharing this update with us, and thank you for the process that you're running, and thank you for the really clear alignment to the goals and guardrails that we approved as a board back in December after the community engagement process and the several long meetings we had as a group to figure out what those should be. So I wanted to share some appreciation for that. I think my only one question is, as this plan is coming together, and as you look at the different strategies that are in place, and I know that this is a draft, but I'm very interested in what you feel are the most important ones. I read this and I nod my head to the whole thing, and I think all of these are things I'm excited to see us do. And I think we should try to do all of them. And I know that there's often a finite amount of resources, whether that's a budget, what you fund, or what we spend our time talking about in board meetings, and how we spend those resources, I think, should be on purpose. And so as you think about, what the most important strategies are from you and your team and the engagement group's perspective, what are those most important ones?
To be completely honest with you, President Lindy, all of these are important. When we look at what we're looking to do in each of the spaces, especially when we think about that the overall improvement of our students is at the center. It's the core. It's the nucleus of everything else that's happening. And so when we think through, when we really look at the individual strategies and what those strategies look like, in a lot of areas, it is further refining work that's already started. It is looking at how we've done previous work and how we can embellish that work moving forward, and also how we're monitoring progress as we move forward. So it would be really difficult for me to isolate one of the particular areas, because I do think that all of them are paramount to where we need to go in terms of getting to the outcomes that we have for our students.
So maybe if that's true, it just makes me wonder, are there one or two, and this is not looking for an answer tonight, but could be for future discussion. If all of them are important, are there one or two enabling factors or 3 or 4 enabling factors that allow us to go after all of them? I think it's going to be, the point of challenge I'd like to offer is we can be a better board, I think, for the administration, and we can together be a better team for students. If we are all clear on, over the next 3 years, what's the small number of most important areas we need to win. I think when great organizations see not just marginal improvements, but real changes in trajectory, everybody in the organization is aligned on that. I don't know what the right answer is. I think you and your team and the people you've engaged are much closer to this. But I think we will be able to make better progress for children if we can rally around a small number of most important things.
I'm hopeful that that small number will be our student outcome focused goals. Because as the board has decided and has voted on what those goals are and decided on those goals, thinking about the work that we're doing in alignment with those goals. So for example, if we pulled out one, while on this list, it's at the far right, optimizing operations. One of the most important things that we can do right now going into next school year to help prepare our students for success is make sure that transportation is right. So that might not be one that we would think about that would be top of mind or first and foremost when we think about the list, but it's paramount to the success of our overall district and for our students. So that would be one that in order for us to make sure that we're able to address students and what they need in Tier 1 instruction and how we're working with them around interventions and what we're doing with them for remediation, we have to make sure that we're getting them to school on time and that the barrier of transportation doesn't become the challenge to them reaching their academic achievement levels.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions or comments for the superintendent on this item, we will keep moving. Superintendent, anything else you wanted to add on strategic plan?
I'm sorry, did I want to do?
Well, it was last call. Anything on strategic plan, and we'll go to budget.
No, I think the only other thing just to add is that this is, if there's any additional responses or feedback, or if there's anything that comes up through the conversations around mission, vision, and forecast, being able to make sure that we are sharing that information back so that we're in that communication loop so that becomes something that we do come back together around to have discussion. I also want to make sure, and I know that we're not at the final stages of this portion, but I do want to make sure that we honor those, and that list is in the other link that was up, but that we honor those that have given of their time and their talent to this. And so those individuals are listed in the front of the draft that's posted online.
That's great. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Moffitt.
So I've been trying to be quiet, but I really do have questions around this process. Sent them to you in an email. We didn't get any response, but what is because this feels very disjointed to me, but what is the timeline? What is our time so that the community is aware? What is the timeline for the vision and mission? Because I've shared this before, I think that the vision and mission should be driving all of the strategic plan. And that should be done by the board, which it is, but I don't hear enough of the community perspective. I know we've got the engagement sessions going on. What is the board reports to the community? So I appreciate you wanting 3 big things that we can kind of all around align around. But the bottom line is the community, the board reports to the community. Our schools have been community centers. That's what our district has been aligned around. Our LSDMCs, our community learning center model, all of that should have some impact in a district strategic plan. So can you share with me so that I'm aware, maybe I'm missing it, but as a board member, what is our what is our updated timeline for all of this to be completed? And I've shared this with Alma. I'm just publicly saying it now. What is our, I see the timeline for the superintendent, adoption in June, refinement in the summer, fall, and I hear the request for when there is an update to the vision mission, let administration know so that they can add it to this. That feels like an afterthought to me. That doesn't feel like a team. That doesn't feel like that. If we report to the community and as board members, we're engaging with the community, it sounds like the community is to just be interjected into something that is already moving and existing. So can you help me understand how I should feel different? I just want to understand the process, how we got here, where the community is kind of driving this instead of it being the administration's ideas and the community is giving input instead of being at the table to design the process. Just if you could just help me understand that, like I'm two, I'll be able to express that to the people that I report to. So can you help me with that?
I will try my best. The two questions I heard you ask was what's the process for engaging the community in the strategic plan?
No, my question, because we've got sessions that we're offering for the community. So that answers that question. That's a very simple answer. Go to the website, engage virtually, but the process has changed since we discussed it originally in January, because we were supposed to have I thought a more robust community engagement with regard to the strategic plan for the board people, for the board vision and mission. I thought it was supposed to be a little bit more robust, but we've kind of gotten where this has been shortened. So my question is regarding process, where it sounds as if the community is an afterthought to be injected and give input in this rather than to be at the table to drive this. And I want to, maybe I'm looking at it wrong.
Yeah, I think we just have different understandings of what's happened so far this spring. I think we are still on the same timeline that we approved at the working session in January. Like, I think if we go back to that, I think the goal was to have this done by end of June. I think the superintendent and board members will please chime in to correct me if I'm missing any of this. But I think the superintendent's done what we approved in terms of that work plan for the spring. The other piece was the engagement with the ALMA advisory group around vision, mission, and forecast. That did have a delay in getting started. That did take longer to get off the ground than I think, let's speak for myself, I was originally hoping. The timeline we're on for that engagement is the one that we discussed and approved with Monica when she was here at our last board meeting. So none of that has changed, and that's all still moving on schedule. And so as I understand it, this is an enormous amount of work. I'm incredibly grateful for all of my colleagues, for community members, for the superintendent. My understanding is we're actually on the same schedule that we approved before.
You just said that there was a lag in that and that we were a little off of the original schedule with ALMA and the board engagement, right? So we're on schedule with the revised.
Yeah, I was using on schedule to mean it will be done by the date that we said it would be done when we started. And so under that definition, I think we're still on schedule.
I've gone on record to just say, I feel like the community voice is not well represented in the strategic plan of the district. So this is a strategic plan of the goals and guardrails, and that's great. But I think that the community voice is not well represented for the driving the vision and mission and the strategic plan of the district. So I've gone on record to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mrs. Weinberg.
And I just have a question to add to that. So in regards to the timeline, I know that we added additional community engagement sessions. So with those additional sessions, would it add more to the timeline? I think that could be a question that maybe Dr. Moffitt is maybe possibly asking, or that I'm asking. Will that provide us more an extended timeline currently with the new addition?
I don't think that what I heard you ask, Mrs. Weinberg, is, we discussed when Monica was here adding some additional community engagement sessions so that people, particularly after work, and people who wanted to attend virtually would be able to do that. And I think the question you asking is that going to change the date by which this will be finished?
Yes. Does it change the date? Because now that we're providing that opportunity, versus having just the one. I think we've now added maybe 5 or 6 more. Will that change anything in order to get the data that we need back in order to move forward?
That's a great question. I would invite Member Bolden or the superintendent, if they have other perspective they want to share. We were on a kind of project team call with Monica about this on Friday. I think it was Friday. My understanding from that is that the report will be done on the same date. So to answer your question, it will be the more community engagement, as we discussed as a board at our last meeting, and to my earlier point, will be still completed by the date that we originally planned. Now, I've been, anybody sitting up here or in the audience tonight knows I have been wrong about how long I think things will take. It is entirely possible that I'm wrong here also. But based on the last conversations we've had, that's my understanding. Member Bolden, would you add anything?
I believe the target date is still the end of June, and I can see where that could bleed into part of July as a result of the work that the board is able to do regarding not just fine tuning, but making serious commitments together in a unified way to what the final product starts to look like. I think the community engagement piece being extended is a good idea, and I think it does impact what we'll be working from as a board, and what the ALMA folks will be working from and administration will be working from. But to go back to what Dr. Moffett said, this whole thing has been, and the community knows it, a kind of a inside out, upside down approach. And if certainly, ideally, chronologically, one would like to start with vision, mission, and forecast, and then build around that with a change in administration, arrival of a new superintendent, and then with us wanting to also do a year's worth of engagement with the great city schools folks about how we even do governance, the focus then became goals and guardrails. So it would be silly not to embed that work as part of the strategic plan. But what the superintendent's brought to us today is showing that that's a portion of the strategic plan, and it's, pretty much specific to instruction. I think we'll not be able to meet the June not because of a lack of community engagement, because the community was also involved with goals and guardrails. But I think this board will have some difficulty that might take a couple more weeks than what we're thinking to actually get to a final product. And I think it's silly to try to figure it out, because the delay is not going to be so much not enough community input. The delay is going to be us working all together to find what that document might look like. I mean, the reality is doing the vision, mission, and even the forecasting. That's heavy lifting, and does only really fall to a few folks. I mean, that's the reality. The whole community is not going to be drafting the vision and the mission and whatever, so we have to assume that responsibility, and I think that will take more time than what we've perhaps allotted. But again, I think everybody's tried to make the most of where we were in time. I would also, not to be too crazy, just think of parallel roads and trying to get parallel roads to have some sort of confluence, and not make a fork in the road, but indeed kind of come together. And I think that's what's happening. The goals and guardrails, doing all that work that we insisted on doing, and all the previous work and the forward work, and then us coming together to figure out how to do the vision, mission. And I think it's very likely that much of what is determined in vision, mission, and forecast will impact moving forward the more the years ahead than this initial kind of thing of, because this is the other thing, the superintendent and the administration had to get to work on what was happening, or we would lose another year. So I think we've made the best of a bad situation. And I think we can, to Dr. Moffat's point, being very, very deliberate about it, I think we can make even more of it. And I don't know, some of what we've done or not done might actually have helped us, and we won't know for a few weeks if it gets us someplace even better as a result of it.
Thank you, Member Bolton. So here I was thinking we had closed our discussion and we're ready for budget, but we'll do a couple more. Ms. Jones.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I think that, and I certainly appreciate where Dr. Moffat is coming from, I understand. And I think what the challenge is, or what the concern is, and I could be wrong, is how we approached it to begin with. I think that's a huge issue. I think there's great content in this document. I think there's great content. I think there's great content in the engagement sessions that we did already, that the board did. And I reread all that information. A lot of what I think we should be able to use, should be incorporated in this plan. And I think what we are about to embark on as we all meet with the ALMA group and come up with ideas about that. It's a lot of material, and I think we are going to have to figure out how we align these parallels that you described. I think that's going to be very important. I hope that we have to work toward making a strategic plan that is workable and usable and people-friendly. So I'm hoping that it's not 50 pages long. So, yeah, so it has to make sense to people, and it has to be a living, working document. So I think everybody is correct. I think it'll take time. So I'm not even betting on the end of June. But I think it will take time to get it refined to what we want it to be. But I don't want to lose the content on any of it, because it's good stuff.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anybody who's not gone yet want to have a chance to share? Anybody I missed? Dr. Moffat?
Well, I'll just clarify. Thank you so much, because I think that we have adjusted, and the realistic answer is that it's not going to be by the end of June. And that's kind of what I want the community to hear, is that it's not going to be by the end of June that we're finished with this. Feel like it's rushed, but I do think that with integrity, we can come up with something very, very concise and close to what the community is looking for. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moffat. Superintendent, did you have a?
No, just to reiterate, and thank you, and thank everyone for the feedback. I do want to recognize our team, because our team has worked with a lot of individuals and spent a lot of time and done a lot of hours around really trying to make certain that we do have something that is strong in content, but also something that is doable and something that is going to get us to results. Yes. And so that was really important. So thank you for identifying that. One of the things that I started with in talking about the timeline is also recognizing, the very first bullet on the timeline was trying to get to approval by the end of June. And I started the conversation by saying, I don't know that that is going to happen. I don't know that that's where we are right now. I'm hopeful that we're able to do that by July, only because it does then give us an opportunity to really start the work. And I think that, and I don't know if it was Board Member Bolton or Board Member Jones that said, I think it was Board Member Bolton, we're not in a position where we can lose another year. And so being able to have strategies, focus on those strategies, align those strategies so that we're able to move forward in those spaces is important to the overall work of getting to the outcomes that we're looking for students. So whether it's the end of June, whether it's July, the feedback part of that really is, and I am in agreement that I don't know that there is going to be a lot that hasn't been addressed already because of the conversations that the board has also been engaging in for a period of time around, the work of what we're looking to do as a district. But if there is something that's glaring, there's still opportunity for that feedback loop and that feedback cycle for us to be involved in that so that we can then take it back to the team to see where updates may need to be done in terms of that. So just for clarification, thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent. So we'll move now to the next item on our agenda this evening, which is an update on the FY24 budget. I was reading the presentation that's up on the deck, but I think that our actual agenda, also the one on board doc says FY24 budget update and discussion. I'm hearing my colleagues say that the next one is transportation. The one I'm looking at on board doc says budget. Are people seeing something different?
Budget update.
Budget is next.
But
Yeah.
is third.
Transportation is
Yeah.
third.
So we're for once I was right. Often I'm wrong. I was wrong about hearing of the public, but I'm right on this one. So we'll turn it to our budget update.
So before I go into the slides deck, I wanted to explain the 3 handouts that you have in addition to the PowerPoint slide. As promised, you have a report that shows you by school, the school budgets and their per pupil calculations based on the projected number of students that was used to build that budget. The second report shows you the school staffing ratios. And then the third one is the ESSER budget as of 4 o'clock today. Very hot off the press and it's very draft. So those are 3 of the documents that I promised to bring to you tonight. Having said that, we'll move to the first slide there, please. So just a reminder that the budget target is set off of usually the November forecast, 5-year forecast for the general fund. And it was set at 565 million because we had an agreement to return back to a budget that balanced to the revenue forecasted revenues. Last year's budget was 613 million. That represented 8% reduction. Next slide. So based on the May forecast, we have room to move to 588 million in. Did I miss something? No. Okay. 588 million in the general fund without impacting the cash balance. It was just because of reduced revenue, or sorry, reduced forecasted expenditures in the current year. Gave us a little bit more room in the next year. That would still present a 4% decrease from the prior year spending of 613. And just remember the 613 was about 7.5% above projected revenues for that year. So we're getting closer to that balanced budget, and we'll balance to the target, but based on the forecast, we do have room to move to the 588 million as a budget target. Next slide, please. All right, so this is where we stand as of today, and we're trying to start with a more holistic budgeting approach. So we asked everybody to put all their asks into one fund, and then as time goes through, when we're trying to optimize what the state and federal funds and ESSER could pay for, this is where we stand. So we had $727 million available. We're sitting at $770.9 million today in asks. And so you can see we still have some balancing to do in the general fund. And with that, I think I'm turning it over to the superintendent.
So as we've started thinking about where we're looking for action, if you go back to the last slide, Rob, just to reiterate here, a lot of the conversations that we've had about budget up until this point have really been around the general fund. And so as we think about the general fund, the last presentation that we discussed and talked about the general fund, at that time we talked about how when we initially had the budget put in, we were something like $128 million over based on what was put in. We wanted to make sure that as we move forward, that we're having that conversation around all of the available dollars that we have, so that we're then able to look at how we're thinking about balancing and where we're thinking about doing that balancing from. So far as we think, and this is a daily process for us at this point, we wanted to make sure that we share where we are right now. And as of tomorrow, we'll be in a different place, because our goal is to make sure that the next time we have a conversation with the board, we're having a conversation with the board with the budget fully balanced. And then we can look at what any recommendations and next steps are. So this is kind of what we have done up to this point. to begin to do some of the balancing. And you'll see on the next slide that it has been taken into consideration as we've looked at each of the account areas. So several things, looking at duplicate positions, making sure that we have positions that were put into general fund, because we did ask everyone to start with everything in general fund, make no assumptions about what particular account any of the items would come from. And so we've done remove duplicate positions, return a couple of items that we know were specific to the funding that could go into ESSER back to ESSER, corrected errors in budget entry. So there were some initial errors that we saw just as the budgets were beginning to be entered, maximizing any other non-ESSER funding sources. And so that would mean those other account streams that we're looking at, and then looking at our annualized salary savings going back to what it was pre-pandemic, and that was an average of about 10 million. So this is the total up until this time in terms of thinking about where we are with making adjustments. We're still pursuing reductions from requests based on our current target. And so just to again reiterate, as our treasurer shared, last year, our target was $565 million. And we, last year, there was approval from the board to extend that to $613 million. So we started the year this year, as we started thinking about preparation for budget, we started the year needing to decrease by 8%. So from that $613 million to the $565 million. With the May forecast, it allowed us to update just a bit. And so therefore, it changes our budget target from the 565 to 588. So it improved in terms of what our base forecast is. But I do want to make sure that we address that we are still going from the reduction of $613 million, which was over our target last year. So that's what the budget was based on, the $613 million for general fund. That's what the general fund budget was based on. We did the initial extract, and this is to give so that we would make sure that we could give you updated information as of today. So the extract we did today showed for general fund, we were at 652. Our target, of course, from the extract to the target is 64 million. We were then able to take those additional actions, which got us to about 46 million more that we do need to go back in, look at next steps to make certain that we are able to present to you a balanced budget.
So this was as a result of the 8 a.m. extract of 652 million of the general funds. This is just a breakdown of the major components. So the school-based budgets that were based on student projections equals 340 million, which is 52% of the budget. And then you add the centralized staffing to the school. So if you recall, the custodians are centrally staffed, but then they're allocated out to the schools. In addition to school social workers and counselors. Then on top of that, there are services that are budgeted centrally, but actually occur out into the schools, such as transportation, technology support, and utilities. And then, of course, our fixed costs would represent $23 million, which is our debt payments out of the general fund, the Fund 34 transfer, which is our building maintenance fund, the $3.4 million. That represents about 3%. And then the rest is central administration. But having said that, 79% of our every dollar goes to the school. It's spent in the schoolhouse. And that'll change as we start changing the budget, but the percent, as we reduce central office to balance the budget, the school-based percentage will go up in total. The next slide.
So our most immediate next steps are to do several things, but one is to continue with the realignment, the review, looking at the individual budgets, and really taking a closer look at specifically vacancies that we have at the central office that have not been filled, vacancies that may not be mission critical, so that we're looking to refine in those areas. Continuing to do the additional review of contracts. If you recall, we did our first review of contracts. I think the total at that time was about $2.7 million. That is not in this budget because those were the initial contracts that we reviewed. Since then, there have been additional contracts that we do need to go back and review just to make sure that we are addressing any changes that need to be done as a part of that. And then maximizing any additional reductions by central office department using the financial impact tool as well. So thinking through, as we're making recommendations for what it is that we're doing next, we're doing that based on background information from looking at our return on investment. And that's from the financial impact tool.
I also wanted to address that the very robust list of questions that we received on Friday afternoon, we were going to work this week to get those put together in a professional manner, answers in a professional manner, or slides or presentation. And so we just haven't had a chance. We were working today to prepare for tonight and had a chance to address any of these questions yet, but we will.
Thank you very much, Superintendent and Treasurer. Do we have questions or comments from board members? Mrs. Weinberg.
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. So my first question is on the slide here where it says the summary actions taken through 6/5/23 regarding the returned athletic trainers to ESSER for the 567,000. Will that continue on?
So right now, what we've provided is where we are currently. The document that our treasurer shared with board members, this particular one is this one. This one shows currently what is included in ESSER. And so right now, we are going back through, we're looking at where we have our overages in. There are some things we're just going to have to reduce across the board, but where we have additional overages in general fund. So I would be remiss to say at this point that, you know, anything would just stay, because we have to then bring that back to the board based on our best thinking around what we need to do to balance. I think that we do hear from the board, and we understand in terms of athletics that it is important for our students to have athletic trainers. And it's also one of the areas that came up as a pretty popular area this year was also Schedule E, and how we're looking at Schedule E. And so thinking about the whole child commitment, making certain that we're able to address that as well. So I don't know that it is included in there right now on this document that you have. But as we look at what we need to do to balance the general fund portion, we may have to take another look at some of the other areas.
And then my last question is regarding the staffing adjustment for 2023 and 2024. You stated that you added 45 teachers. I just want to know, how will that help in terms of, I remember we had a discussion about smaller class sizes. It's here on the last one here.
So this particular slide was just a reminder slide from the presentation that we did in April, where we talked about what were the agreements at that time.
Right.
And so there had been some, so anything in terms of reductions here would already be a part of the overall budget. This wouldn't be an addition to. So this was just to clarify. There were some questions around additions, reductions, and modifications. Specifically, the questions were around the career tech coordinators. That was really that's the main one that's come up again. So that's what this slide was for.
Right. And so my question wasn't about the addition or the reduction. I just wanted to make sure the statement here where it's saying that we're adding 45 teachers to the classroom, is that taking into consideration the discussion in which we were trying to get to smaller class sizes?
So this is a part of the allocation.
Okay.
It's not yet at the point of overhiring. Okay. Because a part of our discussion for the overhiring piece was to get those individual schools to fully staffed first, and then work in partnership with CFT on the overhiring.
Perfect.
piece.
I just wanted clarification.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Other board member questions or comments? Hearing none. Mike's shaking his head at me no, but I'm delighted to pass the mic to him if he'd like to share anything. Nothing. Okay. Other board member comments or questions? Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, again, look forward to the answers to those questions very specifically. Can you go through the ESSER piece with us?
Absolutely.
a little bit more fully and help us out where it says like yet to be allocated or something? Where is that?
Yes, I will.
On the big page.
So
paper.
what you're showing you on this draft, and there's copies here for anybody in the audience that wants copies. I just came in late and I didn't get to distribute them. But the first column you see is the last update that we did for the current year, just for comparative purposes. Then we had an estimate in May, and then as of today, or March, I'm sorry, thank you. I guess I need new readers. The last column was says June 2nd, which really should be today, June 5th is when I updated it. So what we're showing you is under academics, things that we're shifting to other funding sources because, we knew the cliff was coming, so we started shifting things back. So you can see those, the enrollment assistance and translation services have already come back to the general fund. Under curriculum, we brought some stuff back to the general fund. Some things were purchased in the prior year, like the Montessori materials and world languages. We used 23 funds in order to spend those and have them ready for first day of school. You want to say anything about the curriculum, but on student services, I think we're absorbing those back into the general fund. The underneath that we have facilities, the green umbrella for $315,000, and then the graduation support data is in the general fund. ITM, the total budget went down just a tad, but you can see where they're shifting some of their funds to 1.7 for the AV refresh, 700,000 for cybersecurity, some charging cards, and then the new expenses, the badge, enrolling out the whole badge across the district. They did the pilot this year. And then of course the tech leases. So those will come back next year. Summer scholars estimate will be about $5 million for next summer. This summer it's 9.5. Under school support, we have the software that Cincinnati Digital Academy uses for their curriculum, and it grew because of COVID, and their enrollment increased dramatically. The Promise Center is still in ESSER. The new positions, the AP of Culture, are here as an agreement with the board. Curriculum development at $3.8 million. The super subs, we actually increased the super subs this year to 102 based on feedback from the schools. So it's an increase to 4.2 million. Doing some programming with two positions at Walnut Hills, one at Kilgore and Hyde Park. And then these two, the Project Connect Liaison and School Social Worker, I actually think they belong in the homeless grant. That's an ESSER grant, but I don't have confirmation yet, so I will move those two line items when I get confirmation. Still an estimate of $9 million for transportation. Every grant gets an indirect cost value based on a %. And then for the financial transactions, under behavior, you see the athletic trainers. It went from 500,000 to 567,000 for next year. And then the possibility of an expansion of some co-curricular. The crisis communication was a position that we added during COVID, and we've been phasing its funding back 25% per year. So this is this represents 25% of that salary. This will be the last year it comes out of ESSER. And the nursing contract, we're still waiting on a proposal, but we're estimating that we're running around 50 nurses because of their vacancies. So it seems silly to tie up $7 million when we can't fully fund or fully staff those. We reduced that to 5.4 million, but that's an estimate. Under facilities, they're continuing with their custodial supplies. 3.2 million for ventilation, 1.1 for roof replacements, 3.6 for replacement of chillers, and then 320,000 for replacement of boilers. And I actually listed the schools for your indication. The van fleet was purchased. That was a question in the thing. And yes, that was used. We used fiscal year 23 money for that. Then we have some new estimates for, and we're not sure we can use ESSER money to do this. So if we can't, we'll switch out something that's in the general fund that we know will qualify under ESSER. But preparing Bramble to start school and then the staffing to operate them for a year because they weren't part of our school, they weren't at school yet. So we didn't, part of the school budgets. And then an estimate on what it would take to bring Rawson under ADA compliance. We left the security items in ESSER for one more year. And then under talent, most everything's been brought back to the general fund, except for the one health and safety position. And then under culture, we're still splitting out the Hyde Park and Pleasant Ridge and Walnut Hills. The cafe expansion is a multi-year project, so trying to get the right amounts in the right years. So that represents about $13 million in facilities. Our estimate at the beginning of this cycle was that we would have $83 million left in the ESSER grant to fund 24. And we have it allocated out almost to the penny to $700,000 left as a draft. Just to remind you, the money has to be fully encumbered by June 30, 2024. And the bill has to be paid by September 30th of 2024 in order to use these funds. Anything long-term construction projects, you'll never get done in time. I believe we have questions, Mr. Lindy.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wagner, Ms. Bolton had the floor for her question. Did you have other ones you wanted to ask too?
Just a follow-up if I could.
Yeah, please.
So we have now allocated for all intents and purposes, except $1 million, all the ESSER funds.
Well, we don't yet know how much of the money that was budgeted for the current year that has not been spent out because we haven't closed the year out. There will be carryover that we can then allocate out. But I don't know what that is yet until I close the books.
But over the last few years, how much money has all the ESSER dollars been?
325 million.
325 million, and we have now, as you said, there's a draft budget. We've now allocated all 325 million.
Yes.
And some of this is returned to the general fund.
Yes, as we were acting on the direction from the board to close the cliff or to
Right,
address
absolutely.
the cliff, yes.
So of that 325 million, how much has been absorbed in the general fund as we move forward? Or has been assumed? I don't know what the right word would be.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and calculate off the top of my head. I don't know.
Okay. But we've not necessarily used the ESSER funds for necessarily getting a balanced budget as much as we've paid attention to the cliff.
Correct,
Is that
because
fair?
so some of that's right. Yeah, some like for example, transportation. So the longer we take to bring things back to the general fund, we're just going to keep pushing that thing down the line. So we're trying very hard not to use ESSER to balance the budget. We're trying to right-size our spending to match our revenues.
Right, and we're very much supportive of that. One of my general concerns about the ESSER spend, though, is anticipating the next COVID, not the previous one, is making sure that whatever board sits here has more options than the previous board had regarding how to confront those issues. So I continue to be very, very focused as a person that has sat here with limited options about the schools where we are overcrowded and the schools where we are under enrolled, and particularly the seats not just for preschool, but the seats in our high schools. And I don't necessarily, with very limited listing here, I don't see us addressing that. I see us trying to address transportation. Because in this, I'm assuming too that the 10 dedicated buses for field trips and athletics is somehow in this, or is somehow in our general fund budget.
I believe it is, but we'll get confirmation that it is.
Okay. But the size thing, the space thing, I just would hope that we kind of revisit some of that. There are our high school, and I know we're addressing it through middle school efforts, thinking about doing some of, kind of kickstarting some of that. But again, I think there's some issues to address. I'm thrilled to see, not surprisingly, the Rawson piece that starts to take care of cans. But how do we take care of LEAP? How do we take care of some of these other schools that are overcrowded? Whether it's Aiken's preschool, what have you. Just if we could look at that, that would be my one kind of request in a general way for y'all to be thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Bolton. We've heard from Mrs. Weinberg. We've heard from Ms. Bolton. Is there anybody who's not gone yet who would like to also share a perspective or question? Dr. Moffitt.
I have a couple of questions, Jen, and I think I did ask if we could get the guidelines for ESSER 3 sent out, and I think you're still working on that.
Yeah, we are. So I will say though that they have started stricter reviews on our spending. They're becoming a lot more restrictive in letting us, spend that money. They challenge a lot. So I have asked for, and because of a turnover in staff and vacations, we weren't able to get that, but I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
I get it. I completely get it, and I trust you will. I look at this and I want to, immediately, I'm kind of drawn to, and I was trying to do it myself, and I thought I could probably just ask you, what are we spending in ESSER 3 that is about student learning directly? That's kind of, and I'll give you an example. On page 2, I'm looking at student badge system pilot. Fiscal year 23, 400,000. Fiscal year 24, 4 million. It goes from 400,000 to 4 million. And I get it, but my question is is that an expense that we need in order to seriously impact the learning of our students to go from 400,000 to 4 million? And maybe we do. I don't know. And those are the questions that I'm kind of asking. I see athletic trainers, we kind of made a commitment to that, and I do think that we need those things, but we're only spending $50,000, and then it's for student mental health. I'm just looking at this.
We spent a lot of money on student mental health, but it's just not in ESSER. So it's in other funds.
I completely get it. Okay. I'm just looking at ESSER. We bought the Bramble building. It says new purchase. The 3 million, that was for Bramble, correct? Correct. Then the 4 million for Bramble repairs and ops. Go ahead.
So we could not use ESSER to buy Bramble because then the federal government would own the school and not the school district.
Right.
So we moved money from the general fund into ESSER that were qualifying expenses, so we can use the general fund to purchase Bramble for 3 million. Then it's going to cost another 3.17 something to get it ready for school opening, and then about $800,000 to pay the staff to operate it as a school.
So we're going to take the personnel costs for the staff out of ESSER, right?
Actually, I'm going to switch more qualifying expenses, so none of the Bramble stuff will be there, but it's just not in anything yet. It's just a placeholder that we know we need to budget. I stuck it in ESSER so that I know that I need to transfer money.
Okay, so that's a little confusing, but I get it. So update doors for safety. Did we not get a grant for that from the state?
We did.
Here it's fiscal year 23, 770,000, but I thought we got a grant. Is that why we didn't do any with that?
So we did get grants. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find that.
I'm sorry, it's on the last page. It's on the second to the last. I guess I'm just confused.
So,
some of these are placeholders, some of them are not.
So this is a budget, not actuals.
Correct.
So this is the original budget. And I think we did this budget before we actually got those grants. You're talking about for the cameras?
I believe so. I thought we had, a grant for
the doors.
security. It was for
The
security.
doors weren't part of a grant. Right.
So I just, if I could just understand, this is a lot of information and I get it. I just kind of wanted to understand how much are we really, well, first of all, what are the guidelines which you're going to get for the ESSER 3? And are we really, what are we spending that's like a direct impact to the student learning? And I understand those other things are support. I'm not saying that I don't understand it, but it just doesn't seem like that seems to be a significant ratio. Like, hey, you know what? We're spending 30% of the ESSER on curriculum or instruction or something like that, and 10% is personnel. I just was looking at it from that perspective.
So there's 46 million of the 83 that's in academics. Where do you see? Well, and then even under the behavior, I mean, the nursing contract is into helping direct student learning, right?
Well, I'm not saying that all of this doesn't impact students in some level. That's not what I want you to understand. What I hope that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm just talking about what student badge system, $4 million. I want to understand how $4 million for student badges is going to directly impact student learning. I understand that's a safety and security, and I'm not saying that it's not an ESSER fund qualifying expense, but I want to understand. I don't want us to just be spending money because it's there and it's going to go away. I want to understand how 4.2 million for student badges is going to impact that. The tech leases of $8,486 from $8,160,000. Are we buying them all again? Like what? I just want to understand that.
So the tech lease, $8.4 million, is a lease agreement that we have. It's multi-years that provided devices in the hands of all of our students.
Mhm.
So that it has a direct impact on student learning, and the superintendent's going to address the badging.
So I think there are several things collectively, and I think I understand your questions. But I also think that this is one of the conversations that we need to align around as a board unit and as leadership on our end, because when we look at what was in ESSER for FY23 and the changes that we've been able to make for 24, there have been two conversations that we've had at the board level. One of the questions repeatedly has been, because it is one of the things that ESSER can be used for, is the focus on learning loss, which we've talked about several different times in terms of that. The other conversation, however, that's also happened at the board level has been those one-time expenses that we can do out of ESSER that will benefit us to some degree into perpetuity, doing it now with those funds because we recognize that it's important as we move forward. So to take specifically the question around the badging system, for example, one of the conversations that's come up quite a bit on the board has been around safety and security. And the feedback that we had gotten collectively around this space from high schools, because this is specific to high schools, the feedback that we had gotten is that there is a concern at the high school level that identifying students during the day has become more challenging. So the $400,000, and I shared this with the board earlier, but the $400,000 that's included in the ESSER for FY23 was for the pilot. So we're currently doing a pilot. We started that pilot in April. We're doing that pilot at Hughes. If it is the will of the board for us to continue with that across all high schools, it will cost us $4.1 million. And right now, that's what we have added in ESSER. So that just speaks to that one area. But for each of these, as we go through and we look at where the majority of the money is for ESSER, with this last ESSER, the $83 million, over half of it, just looking at the document, is for something that directly impacts instruction in the classroom. Very direct. Our treasurer referenced the academic piece that we see on the first line at the $46 million.
However, when we go through the document, while it may address the facilities, one of the areas that was given to us last year as a priority of the board was the expansion of our outdoor classrooms. So that's why this year we recommended maintaining that as a part, where we are right now, we recommended maintaining that. The graduation support, we moved that, so that would go back to general fund. Our treasurer talked about the ITM pieces. All of the other areas here are recognizing the need that we have for our students for ITM. When we get down to the line that says operations equipment in terms of the charging carts, that is because one of the levels of feedback that we're receiving from schools is that our students they have their devices, they're taking them home, they're not bringing them back charged, therefore they're not able to use them in class, which makes it a deficit to their overall learning. So this was an area that we believe that we could address partially through funds from ESSER, partially through Title I funding. And then the last major areas, summer scholars, we reference summer scholars because we understand at this point that that is an area of focus for the board. We expect that this year we would take that down. Right now it's 9.5 in the budget. We believe that we will be able to come in at around 6.5, if not less, as I've shared with the board. But next year, if it's the will of the board for us to still offer summer scholars, we have to prepare for that somewhere. And so that's the place that we put that. And then lastly, we get into school support, which is the $13 million there, which takes us through Edgenuity. We've had some conversations about the Promise Center to a larger question or a larger conversation that Board Member Bolton referenced earlier. There are some things that we've not looked at as a part of this overall budget, still knowing that we also have to do reductions. And one of them is the need for additional high school seats, the need for additional seats on the west side, the additional support that we're looking at for ELL students. So there are still some things here that at some point we're going to have to address. We just don't know if this is the budget that we'll be able to address it in collectively, or if we have to start gradually moving into that space. But that again would be feedback that we would need in terms of that. And then when we get into the professional development areas, all of that's direct support for the schools. It was the will of the board for us to have an increase in terms of the super subs after having some additional follow-up with CFT. Schools asked for that as well. So that was an area that we added back to the budget as well. And then we moved into the bottom of the behavior areas. One of the pieces that I do want to call out again is the nursing contract, because that's come up in a lot of questions. The city has shared with us that they do not have the capacity to hire more than 50 nurses. So in our budget, we have carried 65, the equivalent of 65 nurses. We've held that in the budget, but they have told us this year they cannot accommodate more than 50. So we did want to make sure that we release those dollars in the budget as well. So that gives just an overview. I do believe that we can take the 83 million, just as we did with the slide earlier, and break down how much of that is for direct support in the classroom. But just looking at it, it's well over, I mean, most of the budget is for that 83 million is a part of how we're looking at the work that we're doing with students.
Thank you for clarifying. I just have one or two more questions.
And then we have Mr. Craig, who's going to go next. And then if anybody's not gone yet after Mr. Craig, we'll get them in after Mr. Craig.
With the positions of the APs of culture and the super subs, we've got those in ESSER now. How are we going to afford to pay for those after ESSER?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we talked about earlier with any of the positions for things that we're paying for right now out of ESSER. We'll have to determine, we talked about the AP positions moving into this year being a pilot for determining if they are going to have the kind of impact to start with that we're looking at on high school transformation. And if yes, moving into next year, then we'll have to make some decisions about what comes out so that those go in.
And then we've got crossing guard contract, 1.2 million under ESSER, but that was that previously a general fund
I'm not sure.
expense?
Crossing guard.
Yes, it was.
So we put it under ESSER, why? Is that a placeholder thing again?
Not a placeholder thing. When we were going through returning back to normal operation, we didn't need security guard crossing guards when we were remote. So we we reduced the budget because where all of our resources went down. Without going into a long history of what happened with COVID and all that, but that part of the security was returning back to normal operations, which it was allowed for it that year. And so we haven't put it back into the general fund yet.
So the last thing that I'll say on this part, unless there are other questions for me about this, one of the really arduous tasks that we have at this point is going through all of our budget and our line items and our budget stems and being able to go through those and then make recommendations for what we can take out to present to the board our best thinking around a balanced budget. So what that means is, as we're looking at this, if we determine that we have overage in some area and we're able to kind of switch out one, move one to one fund and put something somewhere else, that's just a part of what we do in terms of balancing. If, just like as our treasurer shared, initially our goal was to purchase Bramble the way that we discussed through ESSER, because that was an option and an opportunity for that. When we recognized that that was something that was not in the best interest of the district, we then found an allowable item to place there instead so that we could still make the purchase. So it will really go back and forth like that until we can get to the overall balanced budget.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Moffitt, next we have Mr. Craig.
So I'll go quickly because I do want to make sure that Mrs. Weinberg does not forget her question, since she's been so patient over there. But two thoughts really, and just the first is that, we started talking about this earlier in the year, and I know Treasurer Wagner's been preaching this thought as well, is that just the reality is that this current administration at the federal government level is making every effort to crawl back any federal funds for ESSER that they can, or not allow a lot of things that they can. And so it is important that we are doing things correct way and that we are making sure that we are aligning things ultimately. So I appreciate that effort to do that and the emphasis on doing that you've done since I've been in budget and finance for the last year. So the second thing is just that, and just for kind of my understanding of this as well, the stuff that is in the FY24 June 2nd column is the things at this present second that are in the ESSER budget. That's not to say necessarily that's where they will live for the entirety of what we end up using those ESSER funds for, as there's some things, I think even when you were going through it for Board Member Bolton, there were certain things that you knew that, once you get approval that this is actually supposed to go to here, this was where that'll go. So there will be some fluctuation that'll open up some spaces that we will then be able to use stuff, but that raises the valid point that there are some things in there that the goal was never to have stuff that's going to be continuous in ESSER funds, and the reality is we have stuff that's continuous in ESSER funds even this year, and so we just need to be cognizant of the fact that we as a board are going to have to make a lot of heavy cuts when we don't have ESSER funds, that it's going to be a struggle and it's going to be difficult.
Thank you very much, Mr. Craig. I know Ms. Weinberg has a follow-up. Mr. Moraski or Ms. Jones, you haven't asked anything yet. Do you want to ask anything before we go to a second round?
So this would be a quick question.
I was just checking to see if anybody had a first
Oh.
question. I promise. Great. They're saying no. It's all yours, Mrs.
Okay,
Weinberg.
really quick. Thank you, President Lindy. Treasurer Wagner. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I just want to understand something. I always, when I'm reading these documents, I want to know what I'm reading. So can you explain to me what's OPU and then CMB, BU, DU? What does that stand for?
So OPU stands for the operating unit. The budget unit stands for budget unit. So the CMB stands for centralized budget.
Thank
So
you.
for example, if you just take the first school, Bramble, their personnel based on their student projections had a budget of $3 million. The personnel with school OPU, so that means central office added $859,000 worth of staffing to their building. So for a total personnel. So some of it came just from the staffing formulas based off student projections. Some of it came from a central office department, like custodians or school social workers. Okay, so total, that's $3.8 million. Then added to that, the non-personnel, for a total school budget of $4 million.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to understand what that was.
Yes.
Thanks.
We often forget we use acronyms for everything.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, just a couple.
Sorry, Ms. Bolton, we've gotten to you twice already. Is there anybody who's not gone a second time and wants to go a second time?
I think
Okay,
we need
well-
these cards to put in front, like, we'll flip them as we go, and then we'll know what's going on. Anyway.
Open to any and all
yeah.
suggestions.
I know
Okay,
you
go
are.
ahead.
I'm not surprised if we might not see that in the next meeting. But let me ask this question, a couple of questions about the facilities piece. Again, I want to emphasize the importance of the facilities because we are going to be faced with going to the public
Correct.
for money.
Correct.
And facilities is going to get us there before anything else does.
Correct.
And the reality is I want to be prepared before we ask the community for any more money. And their first question is, what did you do with ESSER regarding facilities? But I want to, I understand that idea of the construction and all that. There's plenty of things that we could be doing, it would seem to me, that would speak to that aren't necessarily about having the construction completed, but indeed evaluating certain things. And I know you all have done a 5-year plan or what have you for facilities, but what do you do about Jacobs Center? What do you do about this or that? Or how are we going to merge particular schools or what have you? So I do want you to really intensify the effort regarding the facilities with ESSER. The other piece is, and again on the badges, as I am channeling Mrs. Bates and other people coming forward, too, that we're always talking in terms of safety. I don't know if there's any way that I don't know what badges really do when you have 51 doors. I don't know how that really affects the security. But if those badges versus Metro badges or what, the cards or what have you, when we're going to spend $4 million on badges, but also high schools are asking for uniforms so they can identify which kids are who. I mean, that needs to kind of be addressed. But the last thing, on the nurses, where we have school-based health centers, we shouldn't have to have nurses. And the other reality is that, where we can avoid redundancy is a good way. And I'm sure you've looked all into that, but if not, be thinking about redundancy in some of this. And I'm being negative to Dr. Moffat. She hears me say this all the time. Hate to be cynical, learning lost is learning lost. It's where we are, it's where our children and our teenagers are, and our staff. So I think this it needs to be balanced on ESSER as a result of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bolton. Any other comments? Great. I have not gone yet, so I'll just go very quickly. I don't have any questions, except to say thank you. I do want to flag for a future conversation with Ms. Bolton. I want to hear more about learning loss as learning loss. To me, I think it's really important that we do everything possible for us to catch kids up. And I think that it is our responsibility to say that we need to move them as far as we can. And I look forward to finishing that conversation at a future point. So next item on our agenda is transportation. Moving right along. I'll just mention again, this is another one of our board priorities, and so I'm delighted to spend some time on it with you fine people this evening.
Thank you, President Lindy. And this is a follow-up. We discussed this during our last business meeting, and we just shared the information at that point. We're coming back now for feedback from the board in terms of next steps. So if we can go to the first. You've seen all of this information before, so it's not new information at all. If we'll go to the next slide, please. I do want to make sure that we address why we're having the discussion now. And I want to clear up one thing that I heard before that I think that it may just need clarity. So when we started the process of getting to maximizing our routes, making certain that we had enough drivers for our routes. We looked at 3 different things. One, the first intervention, I should say, was reducing and balancing the number of start times in the district. So at this point, we brought that back. We have successfully done that in terms of being able to move forward. And we have honestly gotten support collectively for our schools, the ones that were of a concern. We've been able to work with them, and we've also gotten support from our non-pubs and charters as well. And so that one is done for us as we move into next year. The second big one was changing the walk zone eligibility. And as we think about it, we are now at the point of thinking about walk to stop. So when we think about the walk zone eligibility and consolidating our bus stops, there was some conversation around during the roundtable discussions that we had, and I think Board Member Bolton, you were at several of those or at several of the conversations. One of the recommendations that was coming out of that was this idea around what was being called hub and spoke. And that essentially said that one of the options that we would look at would be to identify a centralized location that families would go to, that centralized location as a hub, and then we would take them to different stops from there. That is not something that that is not a part of these considerations at all. It was not one that was considered. It wasn't one that was well received. So even from the very beginning where we talked about next steps, that was not one that was included. Consolidating stops is something that happens throughout the process, where just in terms of cleaning up what's happening with bus stops, where we consolidate if we have students that are within that 1 mile, that 1 mile radius, for them to, that 1 mile for them to their walk zone for schools, and they're getting transportation, and you have other students that are close by. Some of those stops are put together so that we're not doing individual stops in several different places in terms of picking up students. So where we are right now is currently, we talked about walk to stop. Our policy for walk to stop is 0.5. So that means that a student could walk up to a half mile to their bus stop from their house. Currently, our walk to stop across the district is the average is 0.17 miles. So what we're really talking about now is not immediately going in and saying that everybody would change from 1.71, from the 0.171, that everybody would change, but that we would look at how we're working with our primary students so that their stop would be up to 0.25, so up to a quarter mile. And then our students that are 4th grade and up would be up to a half mile. So just getting us an opportunity to be more efficient with the stops that we're using. As we've dug into the data, so this gives us just an idea of what those averages are, but as we've dug into the data, we have determined, this is just the same slide from before, but we've determined that we're talking about 1,500, I believe about 1,500 students that would be impacted by this particular change or the opportunity for the change. And I say the opportunity for the change because it's not always necessary. But if it is, it does then allow us to get to more efficiency with the overall stops. So that's why we're bringing that back in terms of an overall ask. We were sharing that currently, even though our policy is up to 0.5 miles, we're doing less than half of that in terms of being able to get to the bus stop. So this is not about changing the distance. I think that we heard from the board that there was really no interest. Especially if we could get to efficiency without having the discussion, there was no interest from the board for us to expand the walk, the radius from 1 mile to 1.25 miles. So that's not something that we brought back as an intervention at all. What we're bringing back now is really working to make sure that we have the flexibility for our younger students to go up to 0.25, and then our older students, 4th grade and up, to go up to 0.5. And so that's what we're looking to get any additional questions or feedback on, so that we'll know how to work with the team as we're getting prepared. Now that school is out, we start immediately with preparing to get students assigned to buses for next school year.
Thank you, Superintendent. So what you're looking for from us tonight is either support or not support for the change that you're recommending,
That's correct.
which is to have the youngest kids go from 0.17 to 0.25 in the max,
That's correct.
and then the slightly older kids to go from 0.25 to 0.5.
Correct. And one other thing to also clarify, it's about the bus stop. So if there's already a bus stop, for example, if you have siblings in the house and one is younger and one is older, then the older one would go to the bus stop with the younger one. So it wouldn't be that the younger one would go up to the 0.5, the older one would go up to the 0.25.
Yep. Questions from board members? I think it would be helpful if before we close this, I think we need to hear from everybody, support or not support. But if people have questions or things they want to ask first, that is certainly reasonable and welcome. Ms. Bolden.
I'm glad that we're staying to the 1 mile. I think that helps us in the long view with the police department, with the neighborhoods, with the possibility of multiple modes of transportation. I think it's fascinating about the magnet versus the neighborhood school piece, which also kinds of impacts the ad hoc as well. And I just, the 12th graders 9 through 12 wouldn't be walking to these yellow bus stops, right?
We have one population at Spencer that was
Gotcha.
that was already grandfathered into that transportation, so that hasn't changed. So that takes into consideration that
But
population.
that would be the exception. So this really is about the K-8.
Correct.
kind of- Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bolden. Other questions? So I think we should hear from everybody, but would anybody like to go first? Mr. Morosky.
I think it's a sound proposal, and I'll just reiterate what I've said each time these presentations have come up. I really admire the deliberation and the intention y'all have gone about to get us to this place, because transportation has been kind of a mess, at least since I've been here. So I appreciate it, and I'm fine with the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Mrs. Weinberg.
I would be supportive of the new change.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Ms. Jones.
Full support.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Bolton.
Full support might be some.
Your mic is off. Your mic is off.
The only thing I would say is there might be some exceptions that would, necessitate in lieu of just with some of our families or some of our kids.
Makes sense.
Vice President Craig.
Full support, and just want to also highlight the fact that that also adds in the 10 dedicated athletic buses that would make, that we had talked about last time.
I was going to do that next, Board Member Vice President.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Dr. Moffitt.
I do support, and I did see the athletic piece, and so I was in support of that. Yeah.
Thanks. And then I'll share just real quick. I think I'll also support, and I think my one question, I think I mentioned that I had asked a group of parents I try to stay in touch with who come from a diverse set of schools across the district about this proposal. One of the things that came up was student safety. And is it, what I'd love to be able to say back to them, if it's true, is that we're not going to, by extending the walk for some students, we're not going to ask students to face more safety threats than they would already. Is that true?
Absolutely. And so what this does, one of the things that we have to do as we're looking at stops, we have to look at things like thoroughfares so that students are not crossing 4-lane highways, that they are not in a stop that's a blind spot. So those are things that we have to continue to do. This wouldn't impact that. So it's not just a blanket, everybody goes to 0.25 for our younger students, or everybody goes to the 0.5 for our older students, but it gives us more opportunity to maximize the stops that we have.
Thank you very much. You were going to say something before.
Yes, just the last two slides. I did bring this up before, but the question was raised again, so I did want to make sure that I left the information here. If we'll go to the next slide for me, please. So this is where we started. We started this school year with 353, the need for 353 buses. We've now, and we use routes and buses interchangeably, so just allow us to continue to do that. We saved 32 buses by changing the start times. And so it was shared that that was going to be the maximum, that was going to be the best option for us to start with, and we can see that in the numbers. Everything else is just allowing us to get to efficiency, number one, but number two, we really wanted to make sure that we were able to include the 10 dedicated buses for athletics and for enrichment activities, because we would include field trips in that as well. We wanted to make sure we were able to include those as a part of the work that we were doing, not as a thought after the fact. And so this is where we are now. Currently, we have, we're still at the right number of drivers. We have 319 drivers, I believe is the actual number. I'm looking at Burkhart just to make sure. 319 drivers. So this gives us, it gives our contractors a few over to use for backup, because that's something that's also been a challenge for them. But we show the consolidated, the additional start time consolidations gave us 5 more. We do have some buses. We have one of our own population riding with our charters, and we have several others that we have partnered charters together to get the students to school. Consolidated stops got us to another -10, and then we added back in the 10 dedicated buses. And so at this point, that's how we got to the 316.
Thank you very much. Anything else, either from the administration or questions from board members about the presentation? Mrs. Weinberg.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. Just wanted to thank Superintendent Wright and, of course, her team on this, because, you know, transportation was very difficult this year. And I look forward to next year, obviously, that being solved with the new bus routes and the new number of buses. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Weinberg. Any other final comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, we're ready to move on to, let's just check to make sure this is actually correct. Yeah, with the Superintendent of Schools. Do we have any retirements this evening?
Yes, President Lindy, we have, actually we have 4. So I'm going to first start off, of course, with our certificated. We have Linda Ewald, an intervention specialist coming from auxiliary. We have Patricia D. Moore, a psychologist out of the Department of Student Services. And then in terms of our civil service, we have Lori Brady, a paraprofessional from Pleasant Ridge. And we have Karen Weststeele, an accountant within the treasurer's office. So we want to just thank these individuals for their service, and we want to wish them all of the best. So thank you.
Very much, Ms. Weinberg. Is there a motion to adopt the superintendent's recommendations? Superintendent, did you have yeah, we'll get it on the floor, and then if there's an amendment, we can certainly have the amendment. Is there
I move that we adopt the superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Vice President Craig. Now, with the motion on the floor, are there any discussion? Sounds like there might be an amendment from the superintendent.
Thank you, President Lindy. So just a couple of things. One, there was a question about APs or APs that are being recommended tonight as a part of superintendent recommendations for positions for the district, whether they're APs of culture or the additional APs. And so the Ohio Alternative Principal Licensure allows for APs to be alternatively certified or licensed, just as it does alternative certification for teachers. A part of this requirement is that the staff, and I'll just read it to you from the actual code, applicants must have a principal or assistant principal position in an Ohio school or district and submit the following with their initial online application for a 1-year alternative principal license. Position verification is one of those. The candidate must submit a current board resolution, which would be from the minutes, from their employing school or district, verifying the principal or assistant principal position in which they will serve, including the grade levels. The other thing that they have to submit, there is a requirement for the amount of time that they have to be in the position. So what the team did before bringing this to the board is received the approval from ODE that the work and the employment criteria was already met. They cannot actually get their alternative, the application for their alternative certification until after they go through the board. And so this was also in conversation and conjunction with CAS, because these individuals would be a part of CAS. There was also additional conversation with CAS because while the state allows for a 3-year window of time for this to happen, we are in agreement from the administrative level and from the union level that this would be a 1-year expectation, so that individuals would need to complete their alternative licensure by the end of that first year. So that was just to be responsive to the questions around the AP. There is another item that require update, and I would like to update from the floor, that I would like to amend the superintendent's report to move the first item in recommendation 1E, promotion. The individual's name is there, Jason Spencer, Senior Director of Safety and Security, to recommendation 1F, change of assignment. So if that could be noted in the documentation.
So we have one request for an amendment. Member Jones was the motion maker. Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so the superintendent's recs are on the floor as amended. Any other questions or discussion on the recommendations? I just looked back and forth 3 or 4 times because Ms. Bolden is always first, and I wanted to see if there's anybody else who wants to go first this time.
This time.
Ms. Bolden, go ahead.
Are the 4 people that are currently recommended to become our APs and for community and culture, which actually by the original definition of what they were going to be doing, which was confronting one of our most difficult issues, which is the systemic racism within our discipline procedures. Are any of these people currently licensed to be assistant principals?
So there are 7 individuals total that are a part of this list in terms of the combo. Overall, there are 3 that are, 3 of them, well, even though there's a 3-year license that we've actually placed on the 1-year instead. So there are individuals that are on the AP list that are a part of the alternative licensure expectation.
So there's more than 4 that don't have license?
There are 7 total, a combo of both APs of culture and traditional AP roles, that we agreed with CAS that we would apply the criteria to both roles equally. And this is an Ohio alternative certification process for administrators, just like the one that's used for teachers.
Any other questions? I have just a couple, but I'll go last. Superintendent, have we used this alternative licensure before?
I understand that we have used the alternative licensure before. I would have to verify. I would have to verify that for you.
Okay. You don't have to verify it. I should have shared. I know for a fact that we've done this before in the past.
I have been told that we have, but
yeah.
I did not want to answer that way without being able to.
That's okay. I can share that I've seen us do it before. And then the last question was, by approving those APs, are we violating any Ohio law? Are we violating any CPS policy?
We're not.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Ms. Bolton?
Yes, no on page 5 regarding the first item, and no on page 6 on the first item. And right now, no on page 26 through 28, because I don't know what this means regarding non-represented, unrepresented. I
So
didn't have
for
a chance
clarity
to ask
on,
that when I was too stunned from the other issue.
I'm sorry, for clarity on page 5, when you say the first item is
First item and what was promotion. I
the
don't know what
change,
it-
you're talking about the change.
Whatever it changed to, I don't care. a no.
And then your second no was on okay.
The 4, I had no idea there were 7 that are not certified or licensed. It's the 4 that I know are not licensed on page 6.
Thank you.
And I don't believe there are 7 that meet the same criteria.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes, can I make a comment though? Okay, I hear some underlying concerns about process and all of that. And I think that, just for the board's reference, we do have an opportunity to address some of those in an upcoming meeting. So I want us to make sure that we at least be prepared to have some conversation about it. And it's more about process. It's not about people. So I want to be clear about that. Okay, but yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
I'm sorry, I was absent for the discussion, so I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. We're now at item I, which is the treasurer's report. Is there a motion to adopt the report of the treasurer this evening?
So moved.
Thank you, Vice President Craig. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any discussion on the report of the treasurer? Hearing none and seeing none, Ms. Wagner, would you call the vote, please?
Holton?
Aye.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mrs. Weinberg?
Yes.
President Lindy?
Yes. So we are now on part 2. We have 3 board matters items this evening. We're going to start with Mrs. Weinberg.
I'll be really quick. So in regards to my board matter topic, it was on tax abatement. I just wanted to know if we had a district position on the abatements, whether it's commercial or residential, if we've officially came out with a statement or if we plan to come out with a statement. So I was just interested to hear what my colleagues thought.
Thank you, Member Weinberg. Would anybody like to go first? Mrs. Weinberg, my memory of where we left this, and if I'm incorrect, please either you correct me or somebody else, but I think we had a good discussion. I think the administration met with one of the experts that the CFT had used to build this report that they released, and that there was interest both from the administration and from CFT and from us of getting together to talk more about that. I think there were some questions about, I know that the treasurer had some information that she felt was missing from their analysis, but my thought would be, I agree with everything we talked about that night. That still sounds like a great idea. For me personally, I'd like to have that meeting before voting on like a position for us, but I'm also very amenable to what other folks would like to do.
And that would be fine, President Lindy. I'm just thinking in regards to just getting an update on that, whether there was some more information that we can be, presented to the board, at the full board.
That sounds great. What I'm hearing you ask, Mrs. Weinberg, is when could we have that meeting?
Yes.
Superintendent or treasurer, do you want to speak to that?
Not had a meeting. Except for the meeting that day, that earlier that morning, the day they presented. There was supposed to be a scheduled follow-up meeting that has not occurred yet.
We're waiting to hear back from them.
I'm waiting to hear back from them.
Okay. Superintendent?
Yeah, I would just concur. I think the only difference is there is a part of that meeting was to do the cross-reference in terms of what was in the report to the information that the treasurer had. So we can follow up with the representative to see when they would be able to do that with the treasurer, so that we can come back to the board with when there's an opportunity to do the follow-up meeting with them.
Mrs. Weinberg, is that
That sounds great. Thank you.
excellent? Thank you very much. Next, we have Ms. Bolton.
Regarding our arrangements that we have with Metro, sort of, and it's not really a contract, but it's something else akin to it, it would seem to me that the board needs to have some expectations as to what we expect from Metro, sort of, before the administration or the general counsel are empowered to sign anything. And I would think that as a group, we could have some time to come up with what those expectations of SORTA/Metro would be. I don't want to rely completely on the administration to figure those things out. I think we need to kind of communicate our concerns over time. I mean, you know, the unique ridership piece or the whole badge piece or the, the length of day that the services are available, the length of the year that services are available are all things that we've talked about before, and why they are so limited in their technological capability to actually inform us of whether or not they are supplying the services that we are demanding of them. I recall last year it required a public records request to get something from them, and I don't even think we got that. I'm not sure. The other piece of it is I would really like the board to have a chance to put a list together. However that happens, I think that would be useful. That was important in our disasters last year, where there was going to be 365 days a year, and what was it, 6 to 10 on the whole day. We are responsible for getting the kids to and from school. And so when we look at the passes that are available, I think we have to certainly serve our families, but we also have to limit our liability and make greater expectations on Metro and SORTA than they've been able to necessarily deliver. I know last year it worked out well where we insisted that the bus stops be, even the regular ones be close enough to our high schools or the schools where they were being delivered, that they weren't walking after they got off the bus stop 2 miles, going through business districts and what have you. I know it came up earlier with superintendent's suggestion too about on which high schools can the buses be diverted and actually go on to the campus or be closer in that way. And that's another danger. So I would like the board to take some time to each member or whatever to make that list of our expectations of SORTA/Metro.
Member Bolton, I want to make sure I just followed the request or the question. So it was, you're asking the board to put together a list of, can you say it one more time?
Yeah, I think it would behoove us and certainly be helpful to the administration and informative to Metro SORTA that we put together a list of what our expectations of Metro SORTA are in this coming year. And give some examples from previous years or what have you, proximity of the stop to the high schools, or the time available that the passes work or don't work, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So then, I think then, do board members have questions or comments about Eve's suggestion that the board put together a list of expectations for Metro SORTA? I have a couple, but I want to see what other folks. Dr. Moffitt.
Well, I'll just comment that I sent a list of questions on May the 30th, and some of them were answered directly. I think Ironetta sent a response from SORTA, and some of them weren't. So I think my question is not about questions, but about the timeliness of the response to those questions. If you like, I can read them. It says in number 1 of the memorandum for understanding, CPS was to receive, according to the contract, was to receive, well, first of all, my first question is, it said that it was supposed to be signed by May the 30th. So was that done?
I think this is bringing up an additional topic, which we can certainly choose to do if people want to stay. I want to keep this on Member Bolton's item for just a second. And so she's asking, would we as a board put together a list of expectations for Metro SORTA? Did you have a response to that topic?
Yes. My response, I was in the middle of saying before you interrupted me. Did you want me to continue? I already submitted questions. So yes, I agree with that we should ask questions. Because I already asked questions that didn't get answered.
Right. I hear the reference to the questions. I think so. I think if I hear you right, you're also supportive of this idea from Member Bolton that the board put together a list of expectations for Metro.
I have a suggestion.
Member Jones.
I have a suggestion that, in response to Ms. Bolton's um, recommendation, that be made as an assignment for board members to come up with a list. And then as part of the plan, we put that on the agenda item under board matters. We can get our staff to compile the list and put it on the agenda. Give it enough time that we can go through everybody's list and address it in that manner.
I'm taking notes, bear with me. I think that's just certainly a reasonable suggestion. Do other board members have any other comments or questions or reactions to what Member Bolden suggested? Mrs. Weinberg?
I would just add that I would be in agreement in making it a assignment so that we can then have further discussion on it.
Yeah, I think, thank you. Anybody who's not gone yet? I think my only question was for the administration. Assume we did this and the board has its list of expectations. What would we do with them? Like, there's a contractual process, right? That we have, like, would this be something we could use to hold them accountable, or would this be something we're doing? Even if we can't, it might be something that's still 100% worth doing. I just wanted to understand how it fit.
So this would be a part of the addendum that Board Member Moffitt is referencing, that no, it has not been signed yet for this year, because we knew that there were questions around this part. The main thing that's usually put into the addendum, because this is not the contract is not up yet, so we're not in a renegotiation of the contract. But the main thing that would be put in the addendum would be the cost of the passes for the students. And Metro has shared with us verbally that they are not looking to increase that cost for this year. So I think if there is anything for us to add to that, we can have our general counsel to send that addendum to the board, much like we did the preschool promise. It was more of a contract. This is really more of an addendum to that, and address the things that are there that the board is then wanting to look at us having discussions with them in terms of making the updates.
Thank you. So I think I hear some support for what Member Jones was sharing. Any other comments or discussion? Great. So I think we can certainly do that and formalize that as an assignment. I think, Dr. Moffitt, if I misheard what you were sharing, I wanted to apologize. I thought this was about a different topic. And if you were on the same piece, that's my fault. I want to apologize.
Well, I will accept that, but I'm getting a little bit of disrespect quite a bit. So we need to check that. I heard what the topic was, and I was trying to stay on topic. I really did just ask those questions, and that's it.
Thank you very much. So I think we have a third board matters item from Dr. Moffitt.
I've mentioned several times at multiple board meetings that there was a desire and outreach from Vice Mayor Kearney to have a joint meeting. So we had come up with two dates, June the 12th and September the 13th. So we were to host the meeting, and now June the 12th is kind of here, so we can come up with another date if that does not work for people. But September the 13th, if we could mark our calendars, and we'll come up with another date, maybe for July or August. But the attempt was to try to get a meeting in prior to the summer and then one for the fall. So at this point, I'm not exactly sure if June 12th works for people, kind of right around the corner. But mark your calendars for September 13th, and then I'll come back and try to find another date.
So this is a request to hold. I'm just looking at my own calendar. June 13th. Sorry, just kidding. September 13th is what I meant to say. I apologize. Dr. Moffitt, did you share a time? But presumably it would be like the last one. I think the last one was like after kind of a 5, 6-ish, so not in the middle of the workday. I think, is that safe
It was
assumption?
in the evening, yes.
Okay. Any questions or further discussion on this item? All right, so we'll move on. Does anyone have any inquiries or updates this evening? Ms. Jones?
One very quick and informative bit of news for, we are members of the Ohio School Board Association, and I just wanted to mention that the Rick Lewis, who was the executive director, has retired and is gone. And Dr. Kathy McFarland is now the OSBA executive director, and it's just to inform everybody of that.
Thank you, Member Jones. Mr. Morosky?
Thank you, President Lindy. A quick update as for the administration, just so y'all know, quick update. I had talked about that Vote Riders program, and I connected the administration with the folks, so that's been done. But I promised I was going to order thousands upon thousands of these little cards that make it easy, and they're here. And I just left them in the board office right by our endless supply of animal crackers, courtesy of Dr. Kareem Moffitt. And they're sitting there in a box. So whoever wants them, probably no good until the beginning of the school year when we can use them again, but they're here and they're there. And I only dropped like 100 of them on the way because there's so many. So there's 100 less on the floor somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Morosky. Any other inquiries or updates this evening? Hearing none, we have one assignment I know of, which was a request for board members to come up with what they think should be in Ms. Bolton's suggestion of a list of expectations for Metro Sorta, and to share that. Do people feel okay about giving everybody a week to do that? So within the next week, share those with Pat and Phyllis, who can compile those for an upcoming agenda. Any other assignments this or any dissent on that? I don't think so. Okay. Any other assignments this evening? Any announcements or kudos? Mrs. Weinberg, followed by Ms. Jones.
Go ahead. You went first. Okay. I don't have a picture to go with my announcement, but for my kudos, I would like to congratulate. Did you clap that I didn't have one? A picture?
No, I was clapping. I like rugby, and I'm so thrilled that Withrow has a rugby team. Actually, no, it was good clapping.
Yes. So I'd like to give a big kudos to Dr. Kareem Moffitt. She this past weekend, she was a dancer for Dancing with the Stars Cincinnati, and let's give her a big round of applause.
And she killed it.
And
She
I was
killed
going
it.
to add that. She did an amazing job. So it was really nice to just support the event and just to, be able to see her out there. And also Board Member Jones was there as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Ms. Jones.
I just want to say thank you to the support team, tech guys, whoever put these plugs up here. You all must have, wait a minute, you all must have got tired of us fighting about and crawling on your knees to make sure that we had access to the extension cord. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any other announcements or kudos this evening? Dr. Moffitt.
I want to say congratulations to the Withrow Tigers. They were the 2023 Rugby State Champs, and there is a slide on the screen. And congratulations to Coach Myers and everyone at Withrow. I'm a little partial to the Tigers, but congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Moffitt. Superintendent.
Just a reminder, we have 2 events that are coming up this month. We know that this is Pride Month, and we do have CPS Pride shirts that are on sale through, I think, the 7th to be in the first batch. The response has been unbelievable, and the proceeds are going to support equity, the work that we're doing around equity. The second is we are involved as a district in the Pride Parade. The second is we will also be a participant in the Juneteenth celebration at Eden Park. So we just want to share that as well. We do have upcoming events that are on our website. So if there are any questions about those, please feel free to follow us there.
Thank you very much. Any other last announcements or kudos? Mrs. Weinberg.
Well, it's not a kudos. It's just a quick question to the superintendent regarding Pride. If I ordered my T-shirt, when do I get it?
The T-shirts,
Because I did.
the T-shirts, they should be delivered the end of next week, I believe. The t-shirt should be here. They'll be delivered here
Okay.
for pickup from here, so that we will have them in time for the actual parade. The parade is the 24th, so we will have them before the 24th. So between the end of next week and the following.
Thank you very much. Any last announcements or kudos? Having no other business before us, I declare our meeting adjourned.